Hello everyone, and welcome to today's Queer Spirit video. So today, I'm going to tackle the very slippery question, what does queer mean? So, queer is a notoriously difficult word to define, and one of the reasons for that is that part of the essence of queerness is resisting definition, resisting boxes, resisting being pinned down. It refers to a way of being in the world, a way of being in our bodies that exists outside the rules. However, the rules are constructed in our context around sex, relationships, and gender expression. Sex meaning both the sexual characteristics of your body and who you are sexually attracted to and have sex with. So one of the most common ways of defining queer is actually in a negative definition, by which I don't mean bad, but rather defined as what it is not. So one of the most common definitions of queer is not heterosexual or cisgender. If you haven't heard the term cisgender before, it refers to people whose gender identity and expression align with the assignment of gender at birth. The difficulty of negative definitions is that they can kind of leave the actual thing quite murky. So like, okay, we're not straight and we're not cis, but like, what are we then? What is the there? So there is a there to queerness. The way we know that is that communities come together around this isness, if you will. We also know it because in ritual space, when we invite the spirit of queerness in, the energy changes. So we know that there's a there. It's just really hard to define. But part of it is about, like I said, slipping out of the rules, slipping around the categories, breaking down the binaries, moving out of the space of rigid definitions around our ways of being in our bodies and our ways of being bodies together in the world. So part of queerness is a spirit of rebellion or transgression around those categories, which at its best, at its most powerful, also resists other forms of categorization in helpful ways. And queer also refers to specific people and communities, and it is kind of an umbrella term. So you have probably heard the acronym LGBT. There are sometimes other letters on the end. We're going to talk about those in a minute. L stands for lesbian and refers to women or feminine people who are attracted to other women or feminine people, sexually, romantically, or both. G stands for gay, which refers to men or masculine people who are attracted to other men or masculine people, sexually, romantically, or both. B stands for bisexual. There is an emerging word, which is pansexual. They mean basically the same thing, which is people who are sexually, romantically, or both attracted to people of both or all genders. The T stands for trans, which is its own umbrella term for people who don't fit neatly into the boxes of male and female, or masculinity and femininity. Trans literally means across, so one of the categories within the trans umbrella is people who are assigned one gender at birth, but are in their essence the other gender and cross that line in some way at some point in their lives. The T umbrella also includes non-binary folks who are people who don't fit neatly into one or the other binary boxes of gender expression or identity. So that means people who exist somewhere between male and female in their gender identity and expression, or people who are like, this whole spectrum doesn't make sense to me, I am on some other plane altogether. Sometimes the queer acronym includes an I. The I stands for intersex, which is sometimes considered part of the trans umbrella, and sometimes not. Because this is queerness, where everything is fluid and hard to pin down. But intersex means people whose physical bodies do not conform to a rigid distinction between male and female. So we have long been taught this idea that biologically there are only two categories of human beings, male and female, and those are determined by chromosomes, and those chromosomes produce bodies that are easily read physically as male or female, and also produce the hormones that correspond to that categorization. Turns out none of that is true. There are more ways for the chromosomes to be than just XX and XY. There are XXY and XXX. Those chromosomes do not always turn on all of the genes that one would think they would turn on, or turn on some that one would think they wouldn't, which means your chromosomes don't necessarily build the body you would expect. And hormones are like all over the place. So intersex refers to the people who are not neatly biologically categorized or physically categorized as either male or female. Okay, so sometimes that acronym also includes an A, and the A used to almost always stand for ally, but it has come to stand for asexual and aromantic, which brings us into a fun category. Which brings us into the fun topic of the emerging identities within the queer umbrella. So if queerness is partly about rebelling, transgressing, refusing to be confined by the boxes and rules and categories around sex, gender, and sexuality, then there are a lot of other ways to break those boxes, to get out of those rules, than the ones we've already talked about. And so queerness is always moving as it responds to different groups of people coming to self-definition, coming to an understanding of their way of being outside the boxes as an identity that they want to organize around or find community around. And so that means that the acronym keeps getting longer, the umbrella keeps getting bigger, which is great. So asexual and aromantic are an emerging queer identity that refers to people who are not sexual or not romantic, A meaning not in this case. And that means both people who are like entirely just, I cannot imagine ever wanting to have sex under any circumstance, or I cannot imagine falling in love with someone under any circumstance, all the way to people who are like, yeah, I could go there, but only under really specific conditions. Another emerging part of the queer umbrella is polyamory. Polyamory is itself somewhat of a negative definition, again, not bad, just defined against, in the sense that it means everything other than monogamy. So any relationship structure other than two people who are sexually and romantically exclusive to each other. Of course, there have always been relationship structures that are different than two people who are sexually and romantically exclusive to each other. But it's a relatively recent phenomenon for that to be an identity and a culture and a community, and it's an even more recent phenomenon for that to be considered part of the queer umbrella. So anyway, everything's always in motion. And finally, emerging into the queer umbrella is kink. So kink refers to any practice of sexuality that includes heightened power dynamics or the intentional infliction of pain, both of those being consensual in the practice of sexuality. Okay, so as it stands today in May of 2022, that's the queer umbrella. But it will change, I am sure. That's part of what makes it fun and part of what makes it queer. So if that's queerness, then what is queer spirit? As I said, we know that queerness is a thing because you can feel it. You can feel the energy of queer space, of queer people, that's different than when queer people are with straight people or we're in mixed ritual space. So when I talk about queer spirit, what I mean is the animating force of that specialness that is queerness. That slipperiness, that rebellion, that transgression, that defiance of categories, and the particular kind of relationship that exists when queer people are with other queer people. If you are curious about anything I just said today, or want to learn more about queer mysteries or queer spirit in the temple, you are welcome to get in touch with me at queerspirit@templeofwitchcraft.org. Thank you so much for watching.